Are we live? It says we're live, but there's no... there we go. If you'll recall from last time, Johnson has been tricked by the dastardly Boswell into a dinner party with his nefarious archenemy, Mr. Wilkes. So let's continue. Mr. Wilkes remarked that among all the bold flights of Shakespeare's imagination, the boldest was making Murnamwood march to Dunsinane, creating a wood where there never was a shrub, a wood in Scotland, ha ha ha! And he also observed that the clannish slavery of the Highlands of Scotland was the single exception to Milton's remark of the mountain nymph, sweet Liberty, being worshipped in all hilly countries. When I was in Inverary, said he, on a visit to my old friend Archibald, Duke of Argyll, his dependents congratulated me on being such a favorite of his grace. I said, "It is then, gentlemen, truly lucky for me, for if I had displeased the Duke and he had wished it, there is not a Campbell among you but would have been ready to bring John Wilkes' head to him in a charger. It would have been only off with his head, so much for Aylesbury." I was then member of Aylesbury. Dr. Johnson said, and Dr. Johnson and Mr. Wilkes talked of the contested passage in Horace's Art of Poetry, difficile est propriae communiae desire. Line 128. For translation, see note 2, page 772. So let's do that. Why don't we? Why not? Oh, that's the next page. Well, we'll wait until we're there then. It's on the next page. Mr. Wilkes, according to my note, gave the interpretations thus. Quote, "It is difficult to speak with propriety of common things, as if a poet has to speak of Queen Caroline drinking tea, he must endeavor to avoid the vulgarity of cups and saucers. But upon reading my note, he tells me that he meant to say that the word communia, being a Roman law term, signifies here things communis juris, that is to say, would have never yet been treated by anybody. And this appears clearly from what followed. Tuque rectus lilicam carmen deduces in actus, quam si professores ignota indicate primus." Now, there's a long footnote. I'm going to get to it in a second. "You'll easier make a tragedy out of the Iliad than of any subject not handed before," is what Mr. Wilkes said. Johnson to this said, "He means that it is difficult to appropriate to particular persons qualities which are common to all mankind, as Homer has done." All right, I know that's all very confusing. I don't know if this footnote will help, but it's a very long one. So I have to gird myself for this. Let me just show you how long it is. So I just read up here a little bit of this page. And the footnote goes right down here onto this page. And then, that's not done yet. On to the next page as well, right here. So it's a long-ass footnote. It's more than a page worth of footnote of tiny print. So here we go. So what's going on is they're nitpicking some line from Horace, Mr. Wilkes and Johnson. And there's a part in Latin here I see. This is Boswell. I keep on wanting to call him Bronson today. Charles Bronson. Boswell speaking right now. "My very pleasant friend himself, as well as others who will remember old stories, will no doubt be surprised when I observe that John Wilkes here shows himself to be of the Warburtonian school. It is nevertheless true, as appears from Dr. Herb, the Bishop of Worcester's very elegant commentary and notes on the Epistola ad Pisones. It is necessary to a fair consideration of the question that the whole passage in which the words occur should be kept in view. And now, I'm just going to read this. It's in Latin. I can't read in Latin, but I'm going to do it anyway. Si quid inexpertum sine committis, or comitatis, et odes personam formare novum, servitur ad imum, qualis ab incepto processeret et sibi constant. Difficile est propriae communias dicere, tuque rexitus illasum carmen deducis in actus, quam si professores ignota indetecte primus publica materias privatae juris erit, si non circa vilem petulamonque morabiris orbem nec verbum verbo curibus redere fidus interpres, nec distillis imitator in atrium unde pedem proferere pudor vetit aut aperis lex. Though I recognize some of those words, such as Carmen, I believe means song or poem. And some of these are obvious. Difficile probably means difficult. But let's see what the translation is here. It's very short. If you trust a new venue on the stage and have the boldness to frame a fresh character, see that it is kept to the end, such as it starts at the beginning and is self-consistent. It is a hard task to treat what is common in a way of your own, and you are doing more rightly in breaking the tale of Troy into an act that is giving the world a new story of your own telling. This does not seem like a translation, never mind. But I'm going to keep on reading. You may acquire private rights in common ground, provided you will neither linger in the one hackneyed and easy round, nor trouble to render word for word with the faithfulness of a translator, nor by your mode of imitating take the leap into the pit, out of which very shame, if not the law of your work, will forbid you to stir hand or foot to escape. Okay, that's from Wickham. All right. The commentary thus illustrates it, but the formation of quite new characters is a work of great difficulty and hazard, for here there is no generally received and fixed archetype to work after, but everyone judges of common right according to the excellent extent and comprehension of his own idea. Therefore, he advises to labor and refit old characters and subjects, particularly those who made known and authorized by the practice of Homer and the epic writers. All right, I have no idea what's going on. These notes are confusing the hell out of me. But, on the off shot, you understand what I'm saying. We're going to keep on reading. The note is, difficile est propriae commune dicere. Lambham's comment is, communique hoc loco appellat Horatius argumente fabularum e nullo ad hoc tractara et aeta que curvis exposita sunt et medio commodore, or rather quadmodo posata quasi vacui et nemine occupata. And that this is the true meaning of communia is evidently fixed by the words ignota indicate, which are explanatory of it, so that the sense given is it in the commentary is unquestionably the right one. Yet, notwithstanding the clearness of the case, the late critic has this strange passage. I'm not going to read this next part, but it's some other translation in Latin. Some other Latin thing. Oh, what the hell? I'll read it again. Difficile quidem esse propriae communiae dicere hoc est materiam vulgarum notum et e medio petitam ite immature antique exornere et nova et scriptore propria viditore ultro cassidimus et maximi procul dubio ponderus est observatio, sed omnibus ultrinique collatus et tum difficilis tum vernusti tam judici quam ingenii ratione habita major videtur esse gloria fabulam formare penitus novum quam vetrem untque mutatum de novo exhibere. Whatever, I don't know. Where, having first put a wrong construction on the word communia, he employs it to introduce an impertinent criticism. For where does the poet prefer the glory of refitting old subjects to that of inventing new ones? The contrary is implied in what he urges upon the superior difficulty of the latter, from which he dissuades his countrymen only in respect of their abilities and inexperience in these matters, and in order to cultivate in them, which is the main view of the epistle, a spirit of correctness by sending them to the old subjects treated by the Greek writers. For my own part, with all deference to Dr. Hurd, who thinks the case clear, I consider the passage difficile est propriae communia dicere to be a crux for the critics of Horace. Now, this is the kind of crap you get when you're reading the unabridged version of the life of Johnson. You get some incomprehensible critique of a Latin translation of Horace that's probably long been decided, and Boswell trying to sound smart by giving his 2 cents on it. Anyway, it continues. The explication, which my Lord of Worcester treats with so much contempt, is nevertheless countenanced by authority, which I find quoted in the learned Baxter in his edition of Horace. Difficile est propriae communicae dicere he res vulgaris dissertis verbis inanare vel humile thema cum dignitare tractare. Difficile est communis res proprietis explicare verbis, vet school. I was much disappointed to find that the great critic, Dr. Bentley, has no note upon the very difficult passage, as from his vigorous and illuminated mind I should have expected to receive more satisfaction than I have yet had. Sanidum treats it thus. All right, these are all just a bunch of Latin translations of the same, or not even Latin, different workings of the same translation. So I'm going to spare any more time wasted on me trying to read this in Latin. And then he says, in Dacier observes upon it, and then he gives some, I guess, Dacier's version of the same passage. See his observation at large in the expression of the following. After all, I cannot help entertaining some doubt whether the words difficile est propriae communiae dicere may not have been thrown in by Horace to form a separate article in a choice of difficulties, which poet has to encounter who chooses a new subject, in which case it must be uncertain which of the various explanations is the true one, and every reader has a right to decide as it may strike his own fancy. And even should the words be understood as they generally are, to be connected both with the goes before and what comes after, the exact sense cannot be absolutely ascertained. For instance, whether propriae is meant to signify in an appropriate manner, as propriety or elegantly, as Dr. Johnson here understands it. Is it meant to signify an appropriate manner, as Dr. Johnson has understand it, or, as is often used by Cicero, with propriety or elegantly? In short, it is a rare instance of a defect of perspicuity in an admirable writer who, with almost every species of excellence, is peculiarly remarkable for that quality. The length of this note, perhaps requires an apology. Yeah, it does, Boswell. Many of my readers, I doubt not, will admit that it is critical discussion of a passage in a favorable classic is very engaging. Nope, not me. And then there's another footnote from later that says Boswell's French in this note is left as he printed it, which means he probably translated it wrong. Anyway, that was a waste of time. Sorry for that. That was 15 minutes. I wish I could give back to myself as well as you, but time marches on. But maybe I'll ask my Latin teacher about it. See what they have to say. Anyway, Let's try and move on from that debacle. Wilkes said, "We have no city poet now. That is an office which has gone into disuse. The last was Elkin Settle. There is something in names which one cannot help feeling. Now, Elkanah Settle sounds so queer. Who can expect much from that name? We should have no hesitation to give it for John Dryden, in preference to Elkanah and Settle, for the names only, without knowing their different merits." Johnson answered, "I suppose, sir, Settle did as well for alderman in his time as John Holmes could do now. Where did Beckford and Trecothick learn English?" Mr. Arthur Lee mentioned some Scotch who had taken possessions of a barren part of America, and wondered why they should choose it. Johnson answered, "Why, sir, all barrenness is comparative. The Scotch would not know it to be barren." I said, Come, he is flattering the English. You have not been in Scotland, sir, and say if you did not see meat and drink enough there." I'm sorry, he said, "You have now been in Scotland, sir, and say if you did not see meat and drink enough there." Johnson answered, "Why, yes, sir, meat and drink enough to give the inhabitants sufficient strength to run away from home." All these quick and lively sallies were said sportively, quite in jest, and with a smile which showed that he meant only wit. Upon this topic he and Mr. Wilkes could perfectly assimilate. Here was a bond of union between them, and I was conscious that as both of them had visited Caledonia, both were fully satisfied of the strange narrow ignorance of those who imagine that it is a land of famine. But they amused themselves with persevering in the old jokes. When I claimed a superiority for Scotland over England in one respect, that no man can be arrested there for debt merely because another swears it against him. But there must first be the judgment of a court of law ascertaining its justice, and that a seizure of the person before judgment is obtained can take place only if his creditor should swear that he is about to fly from the country, or as it is technically expressed, is in mediatione fugae, mediating flight. Wilkes answered to this, "That, I should think, may be safely sworn of all the Scotch nation." Johnson said to Mr. Wilkes, "You must know, sir, I lately took my friend Boswell and showed him genuine civilized life in an English provincial town. I turned him loose at Lichfield, my native city, that he might see for one real civility, for you know he lives among savages in Scotland, and among ranks in London." Wilkes answered, "Except when he is with grave, sober, decent people like you and me." Johnson said, smiling, "And we ashamed of him." They were quite frank and easy. Johnson told the story of his asking Mrs. Macaulay to allow her footman to sit down with them to prove the ridiculousness of the argument for the equality of mankind. Uh-oh, here we go. And he said to me afterwards, with a nod of satisfaction, "You saw Mr. Wilkes acquiescent." Wilkes talked with unimaginable freedom of the ludicrous title given to the Attorney General, Diabolus Regis, the King's Devil, adding, "I have reason to know something about that officer, for I was prosecuted for a libel." Johnson, who many people would have supposed must have been furiously angry at hearing this talked of so lightly, said not a word. He was now indeed a good-humored fellow. After dinner we had an accession of Mrs. Knowles, the Quaker lady, well known for her various talents, and of Mr. Alderman Lee. Amid such patriotic groans, somebody, I think the alderman, said, "Poor old England is lost." Johnson said, "Sir, it is not so much to be lamented that old England is lost, as that the Scotch have found it." It would not become me to expatiate on this strong and pointed remark, in which a very great deal of meaning is condensed. Wilkes answered, "Had Lord Bute governed Scotland only, I should not have taken the trouble to write his eulogy and dedicate Mortimer to him." Mr. Wilkes had a candle to show a fine print of a beautiful female figure which hung in the room, and pointed out the elegant contour of the bosom with the finger of an arch connoisseur. He afterwards, in a conversation with me, waggishly insisted that all the time Johnson showed visible signs of a fervent admiration of the corresponding charms of the fair Quaker. All right. I think that's good enough for today. Well, sorry about all that pointless blathering I did about Latin translations or whatever. I'm sure it's interesting to somebody. Till next time, bye from Boswell. End stream. Here we go.